the president who lost his memory immediately after winning the election. It all begins with Victor Miles. He was everything you'd expect in a man destined for greatness, intelligent, and driven by an ambition that could move mountains. But even the brightest stars can have their dim moments, and for Victor, his came in the form of Mary Williams. Mary wasn't just beautiful, she was radiant, magnetic, the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went. Long, dark hair cascaded down her back, and her eyes sparkled with confidence. To Victor, she was perfect, and he had been hopelessly smitten from the first day they met in the bustling office of high-crest corporations. Despite his best efforts, lavish gifts, thoughtful gestures, and witty conversations, Mary barely noticed him. While Victor's colleagues praised his intelligence and business acumen, Mary treated him with the indifference reserved for background noise. But Victor wasn't one to give up easily. After months of rejection, he decided to take the plunge. One evening, as they stood in the office lobby waiting for the rain to subside, Victor turned to Mary and confessed his feelings. "Mary, I know I've been forward, but I have to ask, will you marry me?" Mary blinked in surprise, then let out a light-hearted laugh. "Victor, you're sweet, but I'm looking for something more. A president, maybe." She winked, her tone playful but dismissive. That one sentence stuck with Victor. 2 months later, Mary was married to a wealthy millionaire named Thompson, leaving Victor heartbroken and embarrassed. But from the ashes of his humiliation, a new fire burned. If she wanted a president, he'd become one even if he knew that he can't have her. Fueled by heartbreak and an almost obsessive desire to prove himself, Victor shifted gears. He threw himself into his career and began a meteoric rise in the business world. Within a year, he had made his first million. His sharp business mind and charismatic personality earned him a spot in Shelter Farm's political circles. But this wasn't just about success, it was about becoming the man Mary had dismissed. Soon, Victor joined a political party and began running for the most coveted position in Shelter Farm, the presidency. His speeches captivated the public, his promises of reform touched the hearts of everyday people, and he was quickly becoming the people's favorite. Behind the scenes, Mary had noticed Victor's sudden rise. She was offended, thinking it was a ploy to get back at her, and she wasn't wrong. Driven by anger and guilt, she whispered in the ears of her husband and his influential friends, trying to tarnish Victor's reputation. But despite the rumors, Victor kept climbing higher. Election night was a spectacle. With a landslide victory, Victor became the president-elect of Shelter Farm. As he stepped onto the grand stage, soaking in the cheers and applause, he felt an overwhelming sense of triumph. But fate had other plans. As Victor descended the stairs to greet the ecstatic crowd, he slipped. His foot caught the edge of the final step, and he fell hard. The crowd gasped as his head hit the floor with a sickening thud. Victor blacked out. When Victor woke up days later, he was in a sterile hospital room. His head pounded, and everything felt fuzzy. A soft voice broke through the haze. "Mr. President, how are you feeling?" Victor blinked and turned to see a woman in a white coat, Dr. Evans, the hospital's chief neurosurgeon. "Where am I?" he mumbled, his voice weak. "Who am I? What am I?" Dr. Evans froze, her face tightening in shock. "You don't remember who you are?" Victor shook his head, looking genuinely confused. "I don't. What's my name? Where's my mom?" The doctor's heart sank. This wasn't just a minor concussion, it was full-blown amnesia. She quickly excused herself and rushed to inform Victor's personal assistant, Paul. Paul was Victor's most loyal aide, and when he heard the news, his eyes widened in horror. "No one can know about this," Paul whispered to the doctor, his voice laced with panic. "Not the press, not the public. We need to keep this under wraps. Shelter Farm just elected a president. We can't afford this scandal." Word of Victor's condition was passed along to key party members. They decided to keep the president's memory loss a secret for now, hoping he would recover before Inauguration Day. Meanwhile, they coached him on his past life, reminding him of his policies, his history, his role. But despite their efforts, Victor was like a blank slate. When Victor was finally discharged and brought to the greenhouse, the official residence of Shelter Farm's president, he was overwhelmed. "Is this my house?" he asked, wide-eyed. He couldn't believe that the sprawling mansion filled with luxury belonged to him. Security guards and staff greeted him with military precision, but he remained clueless as to why everyone treated him like royalty. "Who am I, again?" he asked a guard standing nearby. Before the guard could answer, Paul rushed in, followed by Vice President Harold and other top party officials. "You're the president, Mr. Victor," Paul said, plastering on a forced smile. "How can you not remember anything at all?" Victor's face drained of color as the reality sunk in. "Me? The president?" He jumped back in shock. "Oh my God, how did I become the president? This is impossible." Over the next few weeks, Victor's confusion became apparent in his behavior. During meetings, he would blank out, misidentify ministers, and embarrass himself in front of important dignitaries. He mistook Minister of Foreign Affairs as the caterer and tried to tip him. He misread reports, proposing hilarious, nonsensical policies like turning state dinners into national buffets or declaring Pajama Fridays. Word began leaking out. The media, always hungry for drama, got wind of his odd behavior. The rumors turned into a media circus. Newspapers headlined, "President or Puppet," and "What's really going on in the greenhouse?" The public began to lose faith, mocking him on talk shows and creating internet memes about their clueless president. From her luxurious penthouse, Mary watched the news unfold. At first, she was satisfied. Victor, the man who once tried to use his rise to power as a way to win her, was failing. But as the days went by, and the ridicule worsened, she felt something unexpected: guilt. She had no idea Victor had taken her joke so seriously. She had no idea that she had been the driving force behind his reckless pursuit of power, and seeing him now, confused and humiliated, a broken man in the public eye, her heart ached. Her own life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. Her marriage to Thompson, the millionaire she once thought was her dream, had become a nightmare. He had grown cold, abusive even. Behind closed doors, he berated her, called her names, and on more than one occasion, had raised a hand against her. The guilt of her past with Victor, combined with her current misery, weighed heavily on her. Then, one day, Thompson died of a heart attack. Though her marriage had been abusive, Mary couldn't help but mourn. But once the grief passed, she thought about Victor. Meanwhile, things had only gotten worse for Victor. The pressure from the public became too great, and a decision was made: Victor was to be impeached. The party, the very people who had once pushed him into power, now sought to remove him for incompetence. The once proud and ambitious man was reduced to a shell of himself. After his impeachment, Victor returned to his old house, confused, lost, and broken. He couldn't remember who he had been, nor could he figure out why the world had chewed him up and spat him out. Weeks after his fall from grace, as Victor sat in his modest home, staring out at the rain with no idea of what his life had once been, there was a knock on his door. It was Mary. She stood there, drenched from the rain but determined. She had thought about this moment for days, rehearsing what she would say, but now, seeing Victor's vacant, confused eyes, words failed her. "Victor," she finally whispered, stepping inside. He didn't react, he didn't know her. But the sight of her stirred something deep inside him. A flicker of recognition, a spark of something long forgotten. "I'm sorry," she began, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't know. I didn't realize what I'd done. I never meant for things to get this far." Victor stared at her, puzzled. But then, as she stepped closer, something shifted in his mind. Memories began to flood back, his rise, his fall, the heartbreak, and most of all, Mary. He remembered everything. His eyes widened, and he whispered, "Mary?" "Yes," she choked out, tears streaming down her face. It was like a dam breaking inside him. The fog lifted, and with it, the weight of his past mistakes. He remembered it all: why he had wanted to become president, the lengths he had gone to, and the love he had once felt for the woman standing before him. In that moment, there was no anger, no resentment, only the raw, unspoken bond they had always shared. They embraced, the years of pain and confusion melting away. 4 years later, Victor ran for president again. But this time, it wasn't about revenge or proving something to anyone. It was about redemption, about truly wanting to serve the people of Shelter Farm. And when he won, Mary was by his side, not as a reminder of the past, but as his partner for the future. Victor's second term as president was nothing like his first. With Mary by his side, he governed with heart and wisdom. He had learned from his mistakes, grown from his past, and become the leader Shelter Farm needed. The public, once skeptical and mocking, saw a different man, a man who had faced humiliation and loss, but who had risen stronger. And though his journey had been marked with laughter and tears, it had all led him to this moment of triumph. In the end, Victor had found something far more important than power or status. He had found himself. The end.